Since they started their journey that May morning long ago, the last thing he remembered was the party at the hobbit's house, and they had great difficulty in making him believe their tale of all the many adventures they had. They had sat down and wept, for he felt very weak and wobbly in his legs. "Why ever did I wake up?" he cried. Was having such a beautiful dream. I dreamed I was walking in the forest rather like this one, blended with torches on the trees and lamps swinging from the branches and fires burning on the ground, and there were a feast going on forever. A woodland king was there with a crown of leaves, and there was a merry singing. I could not describe the things there were to eat or drink. You need not try," says Thorin. "In fact, if you can't talk about something else, you had better be quiet. We are quite annoyed with you as it is. If you hadn't wake up, we should have left you to your idiotic games in the forest. You are no joke to carry even after weeks of short commons." There was nothing now to be done but to tighten the belts round their empty stomachs, and hoist their empty sacks and packs, and trudge along the track without a great hope ever getting to the end before they lay down and died of starvation. They did all that day, going very slowly and wearily, while Bomber kept on wailing that his legs would not carry him and that he wanted to lie down and sleep. "No, you don't," they said. "Let your legs take their share. We have carried you far enough." All the same, he suddenly refused to go on a step farther and flung himself on the ground. "Go on if you must," he said. "I am just going to lie here and sleep and dream of food. If I can't get it any other way, I hope I never wake up again." At that very moment, Balin, who was a little way ahead, called out, "What was that? I thought a twinkle of light in the forest." They all looked a longish way off. It seemed that they saw a red twinkle in the dark, then another and another sprang out beside it. Even Bomber got up, and they hurried along then, not caring if it was trolls or goblins. The light was in front of them, to the left of the path, and when at last they had drawn level, it seemed plain that torches and fires were burning under the trees, but a good way off their track. "It looks as if my dream were coming true," gasped Bomber, puffing off behind. We wanted to rush straight off into the woods after the lights. But the other remembered only too well the warning of the wizard and Baron. "A feast would be no good if we never got back alive from it," said Thorin. "But without a feast we shan't remain alive much longer anyway," said Bomber. And Bilbo heartily agreed with him, and with him they argued about it backwards and forwards for a long while, until they agreed at length to send out a couple of spies to creep around near the lights and find out more about them. But then they could not agree on who was to be sent. No one seemed anxious to run the chance of being lost and never finding his friends again. In the end, in spite of warnings, hunger decided them, because Bomber kept on describing the good things that were being eaten according to his dream in the woodland feast. So they all left the path and plunged into the forest together. After a good deal of creeping and crawling, they peered round the trunks and looked into a clearing where some trees had been fallen, and the ground revealed there were many people there, elvish-looking folks, all dressed in green and brown, and sitting on sound rings of the felled trees in a great circle. There was a fire in their midst, and there were torches to some of the trees round about, but most splendid sight of all, they were eating and drinking and laughing merrily. The smell of the roast meat was so enchanting that without waiting to consult one another, every one of them got up and scrambled forwards into the ring with the one idea of begging for some food. No sooner had the first step into the clearing than all the lights went out as if by magic. Somebody kicked the fire, and it went up in rockets and glittering sparks and vanished. They were lost in a completely lightless dark, and they could not even find one another. Not for long at any rate. After blundering frantically in the gloom, falling over logs, bumping, crashing into trees, and shouting for a call till they must have waked everything in the forest for miles. At last they managed to gather themselves in a bundle and count the sums by torch. By the time they had, of course, quite forgotten in what direction the path lay, and they were all hopeless lost at least till morning. There were nothing for it but to settle down for the night. Where they were, they did not even dare to search on the ground for scraps of food for fear of becoming separated again. But then, they had not been lying long, and Bilbo was only just getting drowsy, and when Dory, whose turn it was to watch first, said in a loud whisper, "The lights are coming out again, over and over again. Over and over there. And there are more than ever of them." Up they all jumped. There, sure enough, not far away were scores of twinkling lights, and they had the voices of laughter quite plainly. They crept slowly towards them, in a single line, even touching their back one in front. When they got near Thorin, no rushing forward this time. No one is stir from holding till I say. I shall send Mr. Baggins alone first to talk to him. They shouldn't frighten of him. What about me? Thought Bilbo. Anyways, I hope that they won't do anything nasty to him. When they got to the edge of the circle of the lights, they pushed Bilbo suddenly from behind. Before he had time to slip on the ring, he stumbled forward into a good blaze and fired torches. It was no good. Out went all the lights again, and complete darkness fell. And if it had been difficult collecting themselves before, it was far worse this time. And they simply could not find the hobbit. Every time they counted themselves, it only made 13. They shouted and called, "Bilbo Baggins! Hobbit! You drafted hobbit! Hi, hobbit! Hi, hobbit! Confiscate you! Where are you?" And other things of that sort, but there was no answer. They were just giving up hope when Dory stumbled across him by sheer luck. In the darkness, he fell over what he thought was a log, and he found it was a hobbit curled up and asleep. It took a deal of shaking to wake him up, and when he was awake, he was not pleased at all. "I was having such a lovely dream," he grumbled, "all about having a most gorgeous dinner." "Good heavens, he has gone like Bomber," they said. "Don't tell us about dreams. Dream dinners aren't any good, and we can't share them. They are the best. I am likely to get in this beastly place," he muttered. He lay down beside the dwarves and tried to go back to sleep, and find his dream again. But that was not the last of the lights up in the forest. Later, when that night must have been getting old, Kili, who was watching them, came around and all again, saying, "There's a regular blaze of light began not far away. Hundreds of torches and many fires must have been lit suddenly by magic, and hark to the singing and the harps." After lying and listening for a while, they found they could not resist the desire to go nearer and try once more to get help. Up they got again, and this time the result was disastrous. The feast that they now saw was a greater and more magnificent than before, and at the head of the long line of feasters sat a woodland king with a crown of leaves upon his golden hair, very much as Bomber had described the figure in his dream. The elvish folks were passing bowls from hand to hand across the fire, and some were harping, many were singing. The gleaming hair was twinned with flowers, green white gems glistened on their collars and their belts, and their faces, and then their songs were filled with mirth. Loud and clear and fair were those songs, and out stepped Thorin to the midst. Then silence fell to the middle of the forest. Out went all the lights. The fire leaped up in black smokes, ashes and cinders were in the eyes of the dwarves, and the wood was filled again with their clamoring cries. Bilbo also found himself running round and round, as he thought, then calling, "Dory, Nori, Ori, Owen, Goin, Philly, Killy, Bumber, Biffer, Buffer, Dwalin, Balin, Thorin, Oakenshield." Now people he could not see or feel were doing the same all around him, with an occasional Bilbo thrown in, but the cries of the others got steadily farther and fainter, and though, after a while, it seemed to him they changed to yells and cries for help in the far distance. All noise at last died right away, and he was left alone in complete silence and darkness. That was one of his most miserable moments, but he soon made up his mind that it was no good trying to do anything till day come with some little light, and quite useless to go blundering about, tiring himself out with no hope of any of tiring himself out with no hope of any breakfast to revive him. So he sat down with the back of a tree, and not for the last time he fell to thinking of his far distant hobbit hole with its beautiful pantries. He was deep in thought of bacon, eggs, and toast and butter when he felt something touch him. Something long like a strong sticky string was against his left hand, and when he tried to move, he found his legs were already wrapped in the same stuff, so that when he got up and he fell over. Then the great spider, who had been busy trying to tying him off while he dozed, came from behind him and came at him. He could only see the thing's eyes, but he could feel its hairy legs as it struggled to the wind, and its abominable threads around him. It was lucky that he had come to his senses in time. Soon he would not have been able to move at all. He was a desperate fight before he got free. He beat the creature off with his hands. It was trying to poison him to keep him quiet, as small spiders do to flies, until he remembered his sword and drew it out. Then the spider jumped back, and he had time to cut his legs loose. After that, it was his turn to attack. The spider evidently was not used to things that carried such strings on their sides, or it would have hurried away quicker. Bilbo came as it before it could disappear.